It is a joy. No, it's all right. I'm going to kind of shuffle back and forth. At St. Elias, when I'm preaching, I do this. Because the floorboards aren't exactly nailed down in that one spot, I can kind of feel like I'm in a ship. The floor kind of creaks. And this one spot where I preach from, it's sort of like the church is like the ship of our salvation. Anyways, little things like that. It's a joy to be back here. I'm Father Raphael. I'm the assistant priest over at St. Elias downtown, for those of you who don't know me or don't remember who I was from the last time. I've been here in Austin for 5 years now, and it's only this year that I've gotten to come over here and help out on a Sunday morning. So it's a treat. This is kind of for me, it's a lot of fun to come over and be with you. It's fun to preach in front of people who aren't my normal parishioners, because I can get away with all kinds of stuff preaching with you that I can't. I have to be careful with my own people. But with you, it's much more, not much more, but it's more enjoyable to be here with you. And so thank you for having me once again on this day to share a word with you, this feast day for Saints Adrian and Natalia, a married couple of the 3rd century who were martyred. And their story is very simple. They were, a not so long married couple. They were kind of recently married, and Natalia encouraged her husband Adrian to become a Christian. She was a Christian, he was a pagan, and seeing the sufferings of the martyrs, he was inspired to become a Christian and indeed to become a martyr. And they are a portrait of Christian marriage to us. We have another portrait of Christian marriage for us this morning from the epistle, the 1st Corinthians. St. Paul is talking to the Corinthians about special people that have been in his ministry. He is encouraging them about these special people. He says that he names amongst them a married couple, Aquila and Priscilla, or Aquila and Priscilla. And these are people we know from the book of Acts that he lived with for a time, for about 18 months. And like him, they were Jews from Asia Minor. They had lived in Rome but were expelled by the Emperor Claudius. And they had kind of caught back up with St. Paul. And he calls them his synergi, his fellow workers. He uses that term for people kind of like clergy, for other apostles, for bishops that he appointed in certain places. He doesn't call everyone this. These fellow workers of his are a special category, and I think Aquila and Priscilla must have been especially dear to him because he mentions them about a half dozen times in his epistles. He's either passing on greetings from them or he's asking someone to pass on greetings to them. So like St. Paul, they traveled around a lot. And in the epistle, he encourages the people in Corinth, this is kind of his conclusion to his epistle, to be strong, to be courageous, to stand firm in their faith. And that's who this married couple was. They remained courageous and firm in their faith, and an inspiration to other people, to people who they welcomed into their house, into the church which they made out of their home. They must have been people of tremendous charity to live like this. And that's a charity that is beyond simple mundane charity, but a God-given grace to welcome not just friends and relatives, but the church, and to look outward and bring into their home other people like St. Paul, like the church, to make of their home a church. We know, and we don't know a great deal about them, but one thing we know is that their life had heartache. They did not have any children. They were unable to, and for Jews at that time, that would have been a source of shame and a lot of pain. And we know that anyone who is forced out of their home and forced out of their city is going to suffer. They're going to lose a lot of their belongings. It's going to cause them financial distress. So if there was ever a married couple that would be entitled to a little bit of privacy, not that they don't want to be around other Christians, but that they might be entitled to kind of close the door and be by themselves alone, it would be these two. We, I think, who are married can sympathize with that there are times company is lovely. There are times where we want to invite our church family to our home, but there's a limit for us normal folks. But there are people out there for whom this kind of hospitality is something more. It's something special. I'm willing to bet in your life you've known some people like this. In church, we have a lot of people who are kind and hospitable, up to a point, and I'll count myself, on my good days, I'm in that group. We have a few people who are free riders, and we have a very small group of people who exhibit a kind of charity that sees beyond the walls of their own community, that looks beyond their own limits, that sees the other, sees people to be welcomed in. That isn't a normal kind of charity. That ability to see outward like that is a perspective that a few have. And when you meet these people, when you find them in your community, when you recognize that grace in someone else, these are the people that St. Paul says we should follow. He, in fact, doesn't just say we should follow the ipotas, he says we should submit to them. It's nice if you are used to administrative jobs to be able to delegate leadership to people. I'm sure some of you know what I'm talking about. It's nice to have someone else in charge because they get all the headache. It is a little bit more challenging to follow someone, to submit to someone consistently over the long haul, especially when you're doing something big to welcome in the rest of the world into the church, to try and invite the world to hear the good news of Jesus Christ. That takes a sacrifice on the rest of our parts. I saw last time that you are in the midst of a building program. You're trying to expand your facility. That means that some people are going to lead and the rest of us have to follow. And I encourage you all who are leading to continue to be courageous and firm, to preserve this outward-looking vision, just like Saints Aquila and and Priscilla. But for the rest of us, we have to be ready to follow over the long haul. And that's a challenge. It's great to have someone who's going to take the burden of responsibility for a short time. It's a little bit harder when you have to listen to people over a long period of time and you have to get their feedback and their direction on a lot of things in a community. That's a challenge. That's a challenge for any community. I commend you for taking on this task, and I encourage you to continue to work with your leadership as you do it. As you can imagine, we down in St. Elias are in a similar situation, and it's been on my mind. And so I can't go out and preach in front of my people and say, submit yourselves to me. That would be inadvised. But I can come here and I can say, follow your God-given leadership on this, okay? And I don't know anything about how your project is going. I'm speaking completely innocently on all of this. I just know how church projects like this go. I encourage you to follow these people whom God has given us. Okay. It was not my intention to speak this morning on the gospel, which is the parable of the unfaithful tenants. But given the news that is out in the world this week, I feel I have to address it. And there's there's a terrible contrast here for us between fellow workers in Christ who have an outward-looking vision and unfaithful tenants in the church who have a vision that does not extend beyond their own person. And sometimes they get into the clergy. And sometimes the rest of us have to deal with them. So what I'm talking about here is that in the Roman Catholic Church, they are having a big scandal, the biggest they've had in a long time. And I'm not here to be triumphalistic. I'm not here to snipe at them from my comfort, because I know that I'm the chief among sinners. And more importantly for us, and why I'm even bringing it up, is because since they're the biggest show in town, what happens to them we tend to get caught up in. And I can say this from personal experience. This is not me patting myself on the back, but I was living in Boston shortly after the big clergy scandal broke out there. And I and other clergymen got to receive some of the justifiable anger of people living in Boston at the time. Unfortunately, when people are angry, they don't check to ask, so are you Roman Catholic or are you a Greek Orthodox priest? They're just angry. And so for us in the church, and especially for our clergy, there might be interesting times ahead. What else can I say except what I've already said? Your leadership is God-given, and you have a wonderful priest. You really do. Father Vasilios is one of my all-time favorite priests, and I love listening to him preach. I love working with him in OCF. He's fantastic. I know you already know this. I'm simply I'm encouraging you in the direction you are already going. Support your priest. Protect him. Take care of his family, because they are along for this ride too, and things might be getting very bumpy for us who wear a collar in the United States of America. So, on that somber note, I will pause and thank you again for having me and listening to me. It is a pleasure to be up here with you at Transfiguration. And to Christ be glory always, now and ever, and to the ages of ages. Amen. Amen.